Unveiling 3 spine-chilling true stories of a cursed summer. Terrifying secrets exposed forever. Amy never imagined the summer in Maplewood would spiral into a nightmare. With her 2 little ones, Megan and Jake, playing happily in their backyard, she always believed their suburban neighborhood was safe. But when darkness fell, whispers flooded the air, piercing the tranquil silence. It started as a rustle, a soft duet of eerie sounds faint enough to brush off as the wind until the night, when she caught the glimpse of young Timmy, lurking in the shadows, and an ice-cold panic gripped her heart. Why is he here? Amy thought, her breath catching in her throat. Timmy, the boy from the house with the vanished parents, seemed to watch her children, their laughter echoing into a haunting abyss. Each day he appeared more frequently, a dark specter hovering on the periphery of her home. A sense of dread unfurling like a dark cloud wrapped tightly around her, forbidding the summer warmth to reach her. As the sun dipped lower, shadows loomed longer, twisted, menacing forms that crept through her dreams. She felt them, saw glimpses of them. Amy struggled to fight both exhaustion from long shifts and the paralyzing fear creeping into her daily life. The neighbors had always raved about their tight-knit community, but inside lurking secrets were waiting for the right moment to pounce, waiting for someone to dig too deep before we continue. I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Amy couldn't shake the chill that coursed through her when she confronted Timmy one night. Eyes wide and wild, he looked right through her, and something sinister twisted in the air between them. "I just want to play," he murmured, but it sounded like an echo of something more dangerous. As her heart thudded erratically, she caught a glimpse of fear reflected in Timmy's gaze. Knowing she had stumbled onto something dark, she took a step back. The fog crept in, thick and heavy, wrapping around her home like a sinister embrace. As she unearthed the neighborhood's buried past stories of lost children and whispers of curses, Amy felt the very fabric of her reality unravel. The laughter from her children grew quiet. The summer sun seemed dimmer. Was that whisper she heard truly just in her head? Or was there something evil teasing at the edges of her sanity? A haunting chill settled over Amy like a funeral shroud as she stumbled upon a dilapidated treehouse hidden deep within the woods. Chiseled warnings lined its decaying walls, warnings that screamed of omens and curses designed to protect the innocent, to keep them from becoming just another ghost story in a town filled with whispered horrors. As summer waned, her pulse quickened, and Amy feared the shadows had eyes. Panic clawed at her throat when she heard that voice from the backyard, so familiar, so chilling. "Help us," the world spun. Just as she mustered the courage to step outside, a cold hand pressed against her back, holding her in place. She could feel the dread creeping up like vines. Who was here to help? And was it too late? Amy's heart sank deeper as she turned slowly to face the chilling presence behind her. The hand was icy, sending a jolt of terror coursing through her veins. The shadows around her seemed to pulse, dark shapes swirling in a macabre dance, their hunger for fear palpable. She opened her mouth to scream, but the sound strangled in her throat. Instead, a whisper emerged from the depths of darkness. "They need you, and you can't leave." The voice was a smothering shroud, enveloping her senses as she desperately clawed at reality. Timmy's eyes haunted her mind, an echo of innocent hope twisted into something grotesque. Suddenly, the hand pulled away, and she stumbled forward. The backyard stretched out before her, transformed under the ghostly light of the moon hanging low in the velvety sky. Megan and Jake stood frozen, their young faces pale and wide-eyed, as if they could sense the nightmare encasing their mother. "Mommy, it's scary," Jake whimpered, clutching Megan's hand. It almost broke Amy, that sound. A mother's despair crushed under the weight of her children's fear. "We want to go inside." Her heart raced. She had to get them back in the house, away from whatever darkness loomed just outside their safe haven. "Not yet." The voice slithered through the air like smoke, curling around her with a suffocating grip. The shadows laughed, a sound that sent her heart into a frenzy. "You need to help us." The command felt like a siren call tugging at her mind. Who were they? What did they want? Panic gave birth to desperation. She had to discover the truth. With that seed of resolve blossoming against her terror, she took a step toward the treehouse, the gnarled structure looming ominously in the moonlight. "Stay here," she shouted to her children, urgency lacing her tone. They clung to each other, trembling but silent, watching as she approached the jagged entrance of the treehouse. Each creak of the dilapidated wood beneath her feet sent icy dread creeping back up her spine. Inside was choked with darkness. A musty smell, thick with regrets long buried, clawed at her nostrils. She could barely see, but the air was heavy with unspoken words, like whispers of the past waiting to be unleashed. That voice was a calling to her. As she swept her hand along the wall, feeling for any trace of salvation, the warped wood pressed back like a creature alive. Her fingers caught on an old, rusted latch. Heart pounding, she pulled it open. A hidden compartment. What lay inside could seal their fate. With a flickering heartbeat of courage, Amy lifted the lid. A collection of faded photographs tumbled out. Images of children who once laughed in the sun, now trapped in oblivion. The same pale faces, a mirror of her own children's innocence. Beneath the photos lay an old diary, the pages frayed and yellowed. She could barely make out the scrawled words, but the title chilled her bones, Summer of Lost Souls. Before she could decipher more, the air thrummed with energy, clamping down on her like a vice. A chorus of voices surged around her, rising in pitch until a haunting cacophony echoed off the walls. "Help us before it's too late," before darkness consumes. Just as Amy tried to scream, the trees outside erupted in a windstorm, the howling wind drowning out the voices. The diary slipped from her grasp and into the shadowy abyss where whispers transformed into wails. "Mommy, please." Megan's frantic voice shattered her stupor. She whipped around, desperate to reach her children, but the doorway was sealed, shadows twisting around her legs like tendrils of fate. "What have you done?" An anguished voice asked from the deeper darkness. Amy felt the weight of question bury her. Would she be able to save them? Or was she now just another prisoner of Maplewood's cursed summer? There was no escaping this. Not now. Not ever. As the warm embrace of summer's light faded entirely, an overpowering sense of finality hung over her. And then, from the void, a piercing revelation. It wasn't just about her children anymore. Something sinister was awakening, and her fate was now irrevocably bound to the dark secret beneath the treehouse. What had she unsealed? And could she confront the horror before it unraveled everything? The shadows wriggled, thickening around Amy like a dark tide. She could feel them pulling at her, whispering promises laced with treachery. Panic clawed at her throat. "No, I can't lose them." Megan and Jake stood just outside the treehouse, their small forms trembling under the moon's cold gaze. The wind howled. The trees seemed to stretch, limbs reaching for the very heart of her despair. "Mommy!" Megan cried, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Megan! Jake!" Amy shouted, her voice tearing through the chaos. The darkness inside the treehouse began to pulse, a heartbeat synchronized with the fear gripping her. The whispered iterations of the lost children swirled around her, clamoring for her attention. "You must help us or they'll join us forever." The weight of their words seeped into her bones. If she didn't act fast, there would be no escaping whatever horror awaited them. Desperation ignited her resolve, but moving felt akin to wading through molasses. She needed to get to her children, needed to fight through this malevolence wrapped around her like a suffocating blanket. "Come on, Amy. Be brave for them," she whispered to herself, each breath fighting against the foreboding grasp of shadows. Clenching her fists, she summoned the last vestiges of courage and pushed against the unseen barrier holding her captive. The grip snapped, releasing her into the moonlit night. She stumbled forward, rushing toward her children just as the cacophony of voices crescendoed into a shriek. "Help us, before it's too late." Pain knifed through her ears, and she squeezed her eyes shut, praying it would end. In an instant, silence enveloped them, a suffocating calm that pressed against her chest. Cautiously, Amy opened her eyes, searching for the haunting whispers, but there was only stillness. "Mommy?" Jake's timid voice broke through the silence. She turned to him, her heart hammering with both relief and dread. They were still there. But what had she just unleashed? The treehouse loomed behind Amy, more menacing now, and she felt its pull like a gravity well. "We have to get inside," she said, ushering her children quickly. They hesitated, fear rooting them in place. "Please, we have to protect you." The door swung open with a high-pitched creak, throwing them into the dimness, the air thickening around them. A single beam of moonlight pierced through a cracked window, illuminating the chaos that was yet to come. "Mommy, it's dark," Jake whimpered, his small hands shaking. "I know, baby. Just stay close to me," Amy whispered, her own fear coiling around her heart. The photos scattered on the floor gleamed in the pale light, calling to her like cursed relics. She crouched down to gather them, the fluttering hairs on her neck raising as foreboding shadows danced at the edge of her vision. When she reached for the diary, her fingers grazed the musty pages, and with that touch, the gust of wind returned the dark, visceral force swirling, seeping through even the cracks of the treehouse. "You've disturbed us, you must join us." "No," Amy screamed, jerking her hands back, but the air shifted, coiling like a serpent, squeezing her wrists. "It's coming." "Mommy," Megan cried, her eyes wide, reflecting a fear that seemed almost alive. A sinister laugh echoed in the room, reverberating through the walls. "You cannot escape what you have awakened." The shadows thickened, swirling, wrapping tightly around Amy and the children. Their pleas shattered in the air, the terror now palpable. "We need to leave. Now." She tugged at her children, adrenaline surging as she fought against the tightening void. In that fleeting moment, clarity broke through her fog of fear. "The diary. We can reverse this." A flicker of hope sparked in her mind. Was there a way to set them free from this fate? With newfound determination, Amy dove for the diary, holding it tightly as everything lurched and twirled into chaos. But before she could open its pages, the shadows lunged, their laughter filling her ears like a cacophony of nightmares. "What will you sacrifice to save them?" the voice asked, dark and low, slithering through the confines of her thoughts. It was a question laden with dread. Amy's heart raced, torn between fear for her children and the impending force threatening to envelop them all. She had to decide before it was too late. And as she gripped the diary, breath hitching in her throat, she realized the truth: some secrets were never meant to be uncovered. But now that she had, what horrors awaited them? The shadows surged, crackling with energy, as Amy's heart pounded against her ribcage. The air felt electric, charged with a malevolence that settled like a shroud around them. "I want to lose you. I refuse," she screamed, clenching the diary, desperation igniting a spark of resolve. "Mommy, what should we do?" Jake whimpered, his voice thin and trembling, echoing within the encroaching darkness. Megan clutched at her brother, her small hand shaking. The treehouse creaked ominously, the glint of moonlight casting endless shadows that swirled like ink in water. Amy forced the diary open, flipping through its fragile pages, her breath hitching as she read the scrawled words. Cryptic and unnerving, the entries whispered foreboding warnings about the shadows. The further she read, the more the tentacles of dread tightened around her throat. No, the words began to blur as the shadows writhed like furious serpents, hungry to consume them. "Mommy," Megan cried, her voice piercing through Amy's fog of fear. She snapped her attention back to her children, who were growing smaller as the darkness advanced. "We need to leave now." But something held her in place, the urge to discover the secrets within the diary clawing at her mind. A chilling wind swept through the treehouse, extinguishing the moonlight, leaving only darkness, the kind that seeped into the very corners of her soul. Amy's breath hitched, mixing with the laughter that haunted her ears. Shadows coiled around the children, flickering like dark flames. "What will you sacrifice to save them?" The voice hissed, sinister and sweet. What could she give? What was worth the price? "Don't listen," she shouted, tearing her gaze from the pages. "I won't trade you for anything." Yet, the shadows twisted tighter, pulling her children nearer. Amy felt tears welling up, fear coursing through her veins like ice water. "Help us, Mommy." Jake's plea tore through her, rattling her resolve as she fought against the darker bargain whispering in the recesses of her mind. Suddenly, the rustling from the attic above broke through the tension. A heavy thud echoed from the rafters, sending a shiver down her spine. What was that? Megan's voice was a desperate whisper. I don't know, Amy replied, breathless. Then she turned back to the diary, hoping for clarity. It might be a way out. But as the page flapped in her grasp, another disembodied voice slithered from the shadows. You will never escape. You are in our domain now. The air thickened with malice, and Amy realized the shadows were rebelling against her, pushing back with tremendous force. Mommy! Jake and Megan's voices intertwined, frantic and frightened. Shut your eyes, she yelled, gripping the diary tighter. Just hold on to each other. As they squeezed their eyes shut, Amy felt the shadows pulling at her, filling her head with a dark hunger. She had to make a choice: fight or surrender. The laughter swelled, drowning her in despair. Tears streamed down her face. She was losing them. In a burst of panic, she screamed, I would give anything to save my children. A deafening silence fell. The shadows paused as if tasting her words, lingering in a suffocating stillness. Then, the laughter returned, louder, more chaotic, swirling around them like a storm. Very well, let us see just how far you'll go before Amy could react. The shadows lunged forward, their tendrils wrapping around her wrist, pulling her back toward the depths of despair. The air thickened, a candle burning in a tempestuous gale. She felt her grip on the diary loosen. Mommy! Jake's cry ignited her instincts. But as she fought back, a blinding flash erupted from the diary, illuminating the darkness in an intense white. Then everything stopped. As Amy opened her eyes, the treehouse was eerily still. The space felt larger, hollowed, the shadows merely a wisp on the edges. Was it over? Had they escaped? But in the silence, a lingering presence hummed. What had you set in motion? The shadows whispered around her, more dense than before. And then she felt it a weight on her chest. Looking down, a dark silhouette began to form. A whisper of familiar faces flickered within its depths. The truth clawed at her. There was more to this shadow than she had anticipated. What had she unleashed? Air trapped in her lungs. Amy stared into the darkness. They hadn't escaped. They had only just begun. In that frayed moment, she knew one piercing thought: freedom came with a cost, but the price wasn't yet clear. What had she unintentionally claimed? And what terrible revelation lingered just beyond the veil? The air felt heavier than ever. Amy's heart raced as she stared at the dark silhouette pressing against her chest. It was a grotesque mockery of her husband, a blend of shadows and flickering light that twisted and writhed. Familiar features twisted into expressions of torment, eyes wide with an insatiable hunger, drawn from the void. Mom! Jake's small voice trembled, pulling Amy back from the brink of despair. The weight on her chest shifted, cold fingers of dread wrapping around her heart. What is happening? Megan, hold on to Jake! Amy shouted, her voice breaking. A sense of urgency rushed through her, propelling her into action. She took a step back, instinctively trying to shield her children from whatever this thing was. The shadow seemed to swell, feeding off her fear. You brought this upon us, it hissed, a chorus of agonized voices swirling in the words. You whispered secrets you did not understand. Frantically, Amy tore her eyes away from the shadow to scan the diary again, flipping pages filled with warnings and despair. There has to be something, anything that can save us, she urged, heart pounding in rhythm with the relentless advance of the darkness. That book is no longer yours, Amy, the shadow replied, its voice oozing with malice. Another shiver raced down her spine. It has chosen you, and you have chosen it. Suddenly, the treehouse creaked violently, as if the structure itself rejected the presence encroaching upon its walls. Mommy! Megan shrieked. The dark tendrils creeping closer began to flicker, pulling away as if testing a tether. Mommy! What if it takes us? Panic cemented itself in Amy's chest. How could she fight this? She knew the darkness was testing her resolve. It wanted to see how deep her love ran, how much pain she could withstand. Stay close, she barked, forcing a protective stance in front of her children. With each breath, she fought against the whispers curling around her. You cannot have them. But as she spoke, the shadow twisted again, revealing distorted faces, a parade of lost loved ones, trapped in the depths of its essence. Their lives are but threads in your tapestry, a tapestry woven in blood and fear. You have already paid the price. Amy felt an anguished knot tighten in her throat as shame mingled with rage. Memories flooded her, haunting images of times when she could have fought harder, moments she let slip through her fingers. Her eyes flicked back to the diary, desperate for absolution. "You don't control me," she shouted, trembling but fierce. And then, in a moment of clarity, she remembered the stories she had read, the accounts of others who faced shadows and darkness. A thought struck her, and it ignited a flicker of hope. "You crave fear," she said, rebellion rising within her chest. "Then I'll show you what fear really is." The shadow writhed, uncertainty creeping into its form. Amy focused, pouring every ounce of her will into the space around her. "You think I can be broken? You think I'm afraid of losing them? You are wrong." White-hot energy surged through her, ignited by the love for her children. The shadows recoiled, their darkness flickering violently. "You dare!" the thing howled, its voice fracturing into multiple echoes, filled with fury and disbelief. "More!" she yelled, thrusting her arms out. "I will not be your pawn." But as Amy summoned her strength, something shifted. With every ounce of love, she pushed against the darkness. And with it came the suffocating realization that the shadows weren't just feeding on fear, they were feeding on strength too. Exhaustion seeped into her bones like ice. A desperate thought slashed through her mind. What if it took not just fear, but hope? With one final heave, she dropped to her knees, pleading, "I'll do anything. Just let them go." A bone-chilling laughter erupted all around, teasing her spirit. And thus, you have proclaimed your own doom. As the laughter crescendoed, the world around them began to fracture, shadows splitting the air like cruel blades. The diary slipped from her fingers, falling loosely open on the ground. What have I done? In that moment, the floorboards of the treehouse shook violently, and Amy felt the walls closing in. There was no telling what awaited them next. This was only the beginning. What had she truly unleashed? And who would pay the final price for their freedom? The darkness rippled violently around them, a storm of grief and despair churning with maniacal glee. Shadows darted across the walls, clawing through the wooden beams as if they craved flesh more than fear. Amy's breath hitched in her throat. She was losing control. "Megan! Jake!" she yelled, but her voice was swallowed by the sinister laughter that echoed through the small space. It thrashed around her, the haunting cacophony turning the treehouse into a prison. The very air felt alive, pressing against her like an oppressive blanket, making it hard to breathe. "Mom." Jake's voice trembled again, but this time, it was laced with a deeper terror. His small frame quaked against Megan's. The innocence in their eyes gnawed at Amy's heart as they clung together, visions of childhood colliding with the horror now surrounding them. The shadow twisted its form, pulsating as if mocking their fear. "You think love is stronger than darkness?" It sneered, the voices merging into one distorted shriek that chilled Amy to her core. "You are mistaken. Your love is the very thread that binds your doom." Desperately, Amy grasped the diary, pulling it toward her like a lifeline. She had to read anything before they were engulfed. Flipping through the brittle pages, her fingers brushed over phrases that danced in her mind like flickering fireflies. "An offering," she murmured. "A sacrifice might break the curse." "No," Megan yelled, fear igniting in her bright eyes. "You can't give them anything, Mommy." The shadow recoiled at the idea, as if it recognized the weight of the words. "Sacrifice?" Oh, how delightful it wheezed, shifting closer, a black tide ready to crash over them. "Offer them to me, and I might spare you." Amy's stomach dropped. Offer her children? The thought felt like shards of glass cutting through her. Never. She positioned herself between her children and the oncoming darkness, heart pounding harder than ever. They were her light, the very reason her heart beat beneath this terror. But as shadows pressed closer, the urge to bargain hung thick in the air. They could escape, even if it meant she had to suffer. How could she make that choice? "Mommy, we can fight it," Jake cried, his little voice unwavering, somehow managing to rally a flicker of hope within her. "You always taught us to be brave." Bravery felt so fragile now, ankles deep in the shifting shadows that taunted them. Yet, his words grounded her, filling her heart with the tiniest spark of resolve. She looked at Megan and Jake, faces pale but glowing with belief. "We're strong together," she declared, a whisper morphing into a scream. "We won't give in." The shadow's form twisted violently, as if struggling against their shared strength. Foolish mortals, you will drown in the depths of this night. It lunged at them, dark limbs stretching impossibly far, seeking to grasp flesh and soul. In that moment of chaos, something deep inside Amy awakened a primal survival instinct. "Join hands," she shouted, adrenaline sharpening her focus. They clasped their fingers together, the warmth of their unity pushing back against the cold. Suddenly, a bright light flickered from the diary, illuminating the chamber as if it held a hidden sun. "What?" Amy gasped, the power pulsing in rhythm with their heartbeat. But the shadows screamed, shrieking like trapped souls released from torment. The ground trembled violently beneath them. The treehouse swayed, a ship tossed amid turbulent seas. "We must believe," Amy pleaded, teeth clenched, pushing against the pull of darkness. The shadows hesitated, reeling from the light. Clinging to her children, the warmth of their hands sparked a fire deep in her heart. All at once, a chilling realization hit her. The shadow was not just a creation born of fears. It was forged from the very doubts and darkness they hadn't faced before. "Fight," she urged, gathering every ounce of love and strength. "We're stronger than you." The shadows recoiled violently, a wave of fury shifting through them. For the first time, uncertainty flickered within the darkness. But Amy could feel it begin to press back, and with that realization came a deeper understanding of what lay ahead. What would happen when the light began to fade? In the depths of the treehouse, as they battled both shadows and encroaching despair, an unseen force loomed, waiting for a moment to strike. What sacrifice would they be forced to make when the world turned dark once more? The ground shook like a drum, vibrating under their feet. Shadows writhed and twisted, inching closer, eager to devour the last remnants of light. The bright glow from the diary illuminated Amy's frantic face, each heartbeat echoing in the air like a war drum. Imami Jake's voice waned, his grip loosening for a heartbeat, and Amy felt terror claw at her insides. The shadows were regrouping, swallowing the light with hunger, feeding on her children's doubt. "Don't let go," she cried, feeling the warmth of their fingers flicker like a dying flame. She squeezed them tighter, anchoring all she had to that small, fateful bond. "We are stronger than them." The shadow hesitated, a blend of mischief and wrath swirling together. "Strength, love, it all reeks of desperation," it hissed, its echo indecipherable, whispers colliding like waves crashing, too powerful to withstand. The room darkened, each breath felt like inhaling fear itself. "Your love cannot save you," the shadow tormented. "It will only lead you deeper into darkness. Let it go?" "No," Megan screamed, her young voice barely piercing the chaos. Amy could see the way her courage flickered in her daughter's eyes, but the shadows hissed, demanding trust in the black abyss, whispering vile secrets meant to fracture their bond. "Think," Amy shouted into the chaos, drawing Jake and Megan's attention. "What is it we're strong against? What are we afraid of?" For an instant, the children's expressions brightened. "The dark," they cried in unison, their voices rising above the shadows. It was an unsound logic, but it felt powerful. The realization that together they feared the same thing ignited something within her. The shadow flinched slightly, a raw crack leaking through its facade of darkness. Fear. It was scared of them. "Then let us fight the dark together," Amy said, heart pounding, every breath a battle against despair. The diary sparked again, sending out tendrils of light that fought against the encroaching shadows. "Focus," she urged, knowing their combined strength could push back the darkness. Memories flooded her mind, their days at the beach, running into the waves, laughter echoing like sirens against the rocks. Megan and Jake, sensing her resolve, closed their eyes. "We believe in each other," they exclaimed, voices growing louder, almost daring the shadows to come closer. The darkness twisted furiously, shrieks piercing the air. Amy held onto the diary tightly, her fingers trembling. "Let our love be the shield," she shouted, drawing from wells of emotion she'd forgotten existed, channeling their shared fear into something more potent. The shadows recoiled, receding as if stung. The brightness from the diary intensified, shooting out rays of ethereal light that pushed against the darkness, illuminating twisted forms that cowered in momentary fear. Hope surged through Amy as the room brightened more and more, the shadows fluttering with newfound hesitation. Then, something changed sharp and bone-chilling. The light stuttered. The urgency of the moment gathered momentum. No, no, you'll never escape. The shadow roared, an unholy rage erupting, its form shifting into grotesque shapes, distorted images of people they had known, faces of those lost to the darkness from times past. Her breath snagged in her throat. Amy's heart lurched. Those aren't real, she whispered, eyes wide with paralyzing fear. They're just lies. Megan and Jake looked terrified, but Amy's voice pierced through. We are stronger than what has come before. The words rang true, yet uncertainty hung thick as fog. Each pulse of the light pushed the shadows back further, but they fought back, slashing through with manic precision, hungry for the fear that trickled from their hearts. Suddenly, the light flickered, dimming. Terror clawed at Amy's insides, and her grip on the diary faltered for the briefest of moments. Do you see? The shadow hissed, eyes glowing with predatory delight. You're losing control. Hope wanes when darkness closes in. You must choose whom to save in the end. As the shadows began to swirl violently around them again, Amy's heart raced with the weight of the impossible decision looming above her. Despair tightened its grip. Would they withstand the storm, or would dread take them down one by one in a cruel test of love? What sacrifice will you be ready to make when the light fades completely? The shadow taunted. Amy froze, the chorus of despair around her growing louder. With each heartbeat, the darkness was drawing them closer to the edge. She had never felt this trapped. What was she willing to give up to save her children? Time was slipping away as fear closed in around them. The shadows roared, a cacophony of despair reverberating through the room. Each cry felt like cold fingers wrapping tightly around Amy's throat. She couldn't take it any longer. With a surge of desperate courage, Amy shouted, "We're not afraid of you." She clutched the diary to her chest, pulling Megan and Jake closer. They could feel her heart pounding raw and frantic. The collective warmth of their bodies should have felt comforting, but instead, it was like a ticking clock counting down to dread. No more, barked the shadow, splitting its form into multiple whirling tendrils, each one reaching out like a dark claw for the children. The light flickered dangerously, illuminating fleeting glimpses of nightmares. A neighbor's face, twisted and gouged, weeping blood, a long-lost friend whose laughter turned into screams. Amy squeezed her eyes shut, willing them away. The memory of her family smiling, whole flooded her senses. Focus on the good, she cried, her voice trembling yet resolute. Remember the moments that made us strong. Together. Jake and Megan echoed back at her, voices rising. In that instant, the bond between them felt like a protective shield against whatever horrors the night brought. And then, the air grew thicker. A malevolent force pressed down on them, suffocating and dark. You think that memories will save you? The shadow sneered, laughter mingling with a cacophony of lost souls. You will choose. You will choose. Amy's body trembled with fear, but still, she held on tight. You can't control us, she shouted. We are more than your playthings. In an unexpected twist, a low rumble echoed as the ground beneath them quaked. The walls of their surroundings pulsed, breathing in rhythm with the force of their combined resolve. The light from the diary rippled, mounting like the crest of a wave, ready to crash against its dark adversary. Release me, screamed the shadow, now thrashing wildly, its grotesque shapes merging and elongating into anguished faces, disfigured and tortured. Each face was a reminder of the pain that had once touched their lives, shadows of grief that were used to corrupt their unity. No, Amy shouted again, frustration bursting like fire. We are done fighting ghosts. With every ounce of will inside her, she poured forth the truth of her heart. We love each other. That's our strength. The vibrant light exploded from the diary, further illuminating the engulfing darkness. But even as the light surged, Amy felt a pull, a sinister tug at her chest. What will you sacrifice? The shadow hissed, the question echoing through her mind like murky water swirling on the verge of spilling over. I want tea, Amy whispered, panicking as the metaphorical noose tightened. It's your choice, mother, the shadow cooed. Choose fast, or lose all. She felt the cries of her children echoing in her head. drowning her senses. Jake was shaking, and Megan's lips quivered. They were scared, so scared. "No," Amy bellowed, the fight spilling over into her very being. "I refuse to let fear decide for us." But as she screamed those words, she felt a seismic shift. The light from the diary dimmed, crackling like a weak battery. She was losing her fight, and dread spread its bitter roots through her heart. The shadows coiled closer, vibrating with energy that chilled her bones. Every heartbeat echoed in her ears. The swirling darkness was alive now, feeding off the tension hanging heavy in the air. "Your light fades with every moment of indecision," it whispered, pleasure dripping from its voice. "What will you sacrifice?" In the pouring darkness, a horrifying realization dawned upon her. Sacrifice had a price, and the hands of time weren't just ticking, they were counting down. Then, as the darkness pressed in like a vice, a faint glimmer pierced the hysteria, whispering of hope, yet laced with desperation. "Mommy," Jake whimpered, fingers slipping slightly from her grip. And in that split second, Amy knew this was just the beginning. What would she do when she finally faced the choice? Would love conquer darkness, or would she be forced to let go? With dread pooling in her gut, she prepared for the fight of her life, as the shadows kept looming, relentless and hungry, ready to tear apart everything she held dear. What ugly truths awaited them in the heart of darkness? The room trembled as shadows twisted and writhed, engulfing the last remnants of daylight. Amy clutched the diary tighter, feeling its weight almost as if it had a pulse of its own, a heart beating in sync with her panic. They could scream all they wanted, but deep down, she felt the truth gnawing away at her resolve. "Think. We need to think," she shouted, glancing at Megan and Jake. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with terror. The shadows danced wantonly around them. Memories twisted grotesquely, whispering their darkest secrets. "Mommy, please," Megan's voice cracked, a fragile thread about to snap. As the shadows closed in, Amy shouted back, desperation filling her words. "We need a plan. Strategize." "Strategize?" Jake echoed incredulously. "How can we strategize against that?" The shadows roared louder, laughter mixing with the chilling echoes of lost souls. "You want to fight? Choose bravely. What would you give?" The darkness, a living thing, slithered nearer, its tendrils curling like snakes around their ankles, squeezing tight enough to make them gasp. Amy felt her heart quicken, like it was trying to outrun the mounting terror. She couldn't let this whatever it was break them. "Stay strong, guys," she said, mustering strength. "We can't let it divide us." But the shadows pulsed and swayed, each oscillating hiss echoing the innermost fears of the trio. Memories flickered like bad films rewinding, faces distorted, screams deepened, laughter warped into malevolence. Each flicker showed another chink in their armor. "Remember that time we climbed Ghost Mountain?" Jake shouted suddenly, desperation edging into his tone. "None of us broke. We made a promise, right?" "Yes." Megan seized onto that light like a life buoy. "We said we'd never leave each other." The shadow paused, seeming to contemplate this newfound strength. "So you all choose to stay together?" "It only takes one to break that promise." Amy felt the walls push against her, the chilling dread creeping back in. "No, we swear it. You can't take that away." Then suddenly, the diary glowed brighter, almost burning hot in her hands. A reminder, an invitation to draw power from their bond. "Ready?" she asked, her voice steadying. "Ready," came the unified shout of her children, voices merging to form a sound that shattered doubt like glass. The shadows recoiled for the briefest moment as the light blazed. Amy felt warmth wave through her like a portal opening to childhood joy, a light bursting to life in the very depths of night. With shared breaths and heartbeats, they faced off against their fear. The dark crept even closer, brushing against their skin like a vile whisper. "You don't understand. Love isn't enough. It never is." A sickening grin spread across the shadow, disfigured faces writhing behind it, as if each was fighting to break free, to claim the children. They needed to act, and fast. "Let us pull together. On 3. Amy's heart pounded louder as she counted out. 1, 2, 3. They plunged forward as one, squeezing their eyes shut, pouring every ounce of belief into their scream. The shadows faltered, hesitating. And then silence. A pause so thick it drove a nail of dread into their hearts. What is happening? Jake asked, voice trembling as they huddled, fear wrapping around them like ghostly fingers. And with that silence came stabbing reality. The world around them twisted and turned, and the light dimmed, almost snuffing out. For the first time since this nightmare began, Amy felt the shadows sharing something, a sly secret of their own. What waited in the intertwined darkness? Would she break before it would? What price? She whispered, unaware of how close she was to understanding the cost of survival. But no truth could diminish the resolve that encircled them. Choices lay ahead, but was sacrifice their only path? Megan, Jake, Amy breathed, realizing the truth was only beginning to unfold. Terror hung in the air, tangible, palpable as a final question loomed heavily, daring her to answer. What must she lose to save those she loved the most? The darkness swirled with eager anticipation, ready to unveil the deepest horrors of their hearts. What awaited them in the answers they were forced to confront? The air thickened with tension, shadows swirling like eager wolves around their prey. Amy gripped the diary with fierce determination, her heart pounding like a war drum. It was clear, they needed to make a stand against the encroaching darkness, for fear was no longer just an emotion, it had morphed into a tangible beast that demanded to be fed. Megan, Jake, together. Remember our bond, she shouted, her voice ringing with urgency. She felt their hands intertwine with hers, warmth surging through the trio as they formed a united front against the chaos breathing down their necks. What price will you pay? The shadow taunted, its voice a twisted amalgamation of the memories it wielded like a weapon. You already know what you must sacrifice now. Amy yelled back, anger bubbling inside her. Our love is stronger than your games. She held fast to the diary, its pages glowing faintly as if answering to her resolve. What if I take your children? It leered, shadows writhing with anticipation. Would you trade their lives for your own freedom? A cold shiver raced down Amy's spine. This was a choice no mother should have to make. I will never abandon them, she shouted defiantly, but doubt gnawed at her. Desperation flooded her heart, threading into a suffocating fear. Megan's voice broke through the thoughts swirling like a storm. Mommy, we can fight it. Together. Her small hand squeezed tighter, reminding Amy of the countless hours they spent crafting dreams, stories held close within the warmth of family. Fight, Jake echoed, his voice trembling with both fear and determination. You taught us that love makes us strong. As they rallied against the shadow, a surge of light erupted from the diary's pages, illuminating their surroundings with fierce brilliance. The dark presence recoiled, its tendrils slackening as they felt the wave of warmth wash over them. No, this can't be. The shadow writhed, no longer certain. You can't be stronger than the darkness. But there was power in their union, a radiant force fueled by every laugh, every adventure, every cherished memory. We are alive, and we will choose love. Amy roared, the air crackling with raw energy. Hand in hand, they pushed forward, channeling their collective strength. Let us be a beacon against your shadows, she declared, as the diary pulsed with light, each heartbeat synchronizing with their shared resolve. The darkness flickered. It was stirring, panicking, fearing the very essence that bonded them. You can't escape. You must choose now. Amy felt a weight on her chest, the burden of an impossible decision looming heavy. But just as despair threatened to claim her, memories of laughter flooded her mind, their family trips, silly dance parties in the living room, and quiet moments reading together at sunset. With a deep breath, she closed her eyes and focused. We don't choose fear, she whispered fiercely. We choose each other. Their hands tightened around one another, a fierce symbol of their unity. And as they channeled their love into a single thought, the shadows shrieked in agony, intertwining in a vortex of terror. In that decisive moment, the light burst forth, a blinding halo of hope, pushing against the darkness that had haunted them for so long. Shadows shrieked, recoiling like an injured beast, frantically writhing before the encompassing warmth. Now, together, Amy urged, feeling the ground shift beneath them. They charged forward as a unified force, breaking through the black mist of despair. Suddenly, silence enveloped them, a mesmerizing calm washing away the chaos. Amy slowly opened her eyes and dared to look around. The treehouse, once a den of nightmares, had transformed. The shadows had faded, a ghostly veil retreating into the corners, leaving only echoes of their despair. Mom. Jake's voice softened, filled with hesitant hope. We did it, sweethearts. Amy breathed, relief flooding through her veins like sunlight breaking after a storm. We faced the darkness, and we won. Together. Overhead, moonlight streamed through the cracked window, illuminating the remnants of a confined fear now swept away. The diary lay gently on the ground, piles of shadows scattered like remnants of a bad dream. Megan blinked, tears spilling down her cheeks. Can they come back? No, Amy reassured, wrapping her arms tightly around her children, pulling them close. No more shadows. No more darkness. We are free. With that, the remnants of the past felt lighter, nothing but whispers of long-lost fears defeated by their steadfast love. As they emerged into the gentle embrace of the summer night, a promise hung in the air. They would never face those terrors again. And as they stepped out into the world that awaited them, Amy glanced back at the treehouse, the shadows now nothing more than distant memories, light conquering their darkness at last. Let us make new memories, Amy said with a soft smile, her heart lifting as her children grinned brightly, safe and secure in their mother's embrace. They walked away, hand in hand, stepping toward the dawn, a testament of triumph over fear, a bond forever unbreakable. Now it's time for you to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. We want to hear from you. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.